one of the things I know you talked about, we want to get your opinion on, recently you had a talk with peptides. How do you feel about peptides?
Yeah, I love peptides. I think there's a lot of therapeutic potential there. And I know that the FDA just kind of re-regulated that. And I understand where the FDA is coming from, honestly. This is where a balanced perspective is going to be like, look, there's all these people that aren't doctors, right, that are out there saying, hey, we're going to cure your COVID. And when they said that, what was pulled? Thymosin alpha 1, gone. Thymosin beta 4, gone. Why? Because it was being touted as a cure for treating an issue,
Yeah.
right? I think the language around peptides is what got it in trouble in the first place, right? You cannot say, hey, I'm going to use this peptide to treat this ailment. You can say, hey, it's going to support this physiology and this chemistry. So that's what led it to, I think, being kind of pulled. And I also understand where the FDA is coming from because look, you got all these clinics popping up, and I know some of the doctors that are just throwing people on peptides left and right, willy-nilly, no discretion, no surveillance. They're doing all these growth hormone analogs and so forth and whatnot. And I think that's a little, reckless in my opinion. So However, it's not to say they're not beneficial. I love them. I love, CJC Ipamorelin. I love the BPC-157, the TB500 and everything in between, and all the other fancier, more obscure peptides. I think they, for my patients, when I was able to use them a little bit more readily, the results were remarkable, but I was doing it responsibly, I think, trying
Yeah.
to at least, right? And not getting somebody on a stack that they're going to be on forever, and it's like knowing how to cycle on and off it, use it responsibly and in kind of in a method that's not going to get you or your patient in trouble clinically,
Yeah.
and I think there's a lot of recklessness out there. And I know there's a Seeds Institute, and I'm friends with Jim Lavelle, and we've had conversations around the regulatory landscape about peptides. And it's just like right now they're like, oh, there's no research. Well, there is research. It's overseas, Russia and Europe and everything else that's been using this, without, negative adverse outcomes, for the most part for a very long while. But that's a whole nother conversation. But I'm very pro peptide, but used and regulated to a certain level of integrity because, you're getting, who knows where you're sourcing this stuff from. And you could be getting
Right.
like veterinary grade peptides that have a high amount of endotoxin or LPS that could lead to negative health outcomes, right? So there needs to be some regulation of this stuff, that to protect the public as a whole. So
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point. I'm going to shock some people that I truly believe, like FDA regulation. I think we both have our thoughts on the FDA and kind of what they do as a whole. But FDA regulation is needed. I
yeah,
do find that a lot of integrative medicine has become a little bit too Wild West. And you're seeing just IV pop-ups where there are ghost doctors, basically, meaning no one's truly there. And it's just a nurse that just prescribes whatever you want, and that is the way to approach healing, and it's not. And I think it basically puts a target anyway on people that are doing good things and being artistic with it. And then things like peptides, exosomes, it's a wild west. It's a new thing. But like it reminds me of like in finance and crypto and everything, you need regulation. Like when regulation comes, it weeds out the bad characters, the SBFs, and like all these people trying to, Ponzi scheme everyone. And that's
yeah.
what we need in medicine, especially. I think on a whole, it's not just to say integrate. If it's anything new, we need those type of regulatory capacities. And that's where some people get a little bit upset. But I truly do think, in no other field should we put, safety, quality, and all these things, restrictions at its highest. But we can't just take them away, like you said. Then you're going to have
Yeah.
Russia and Europe doing amazing things and innovative things. Just because there's access, it doesn't mean that there aren't restrictions, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And look, I have a handful of patients that work at the FDA, and they'll be the first one to tell you, we don't know why this is happening.
Right.
And, key opinion and decision makers, within the FDA. My practice is here in Maryland, just outside of DC. So, I have a good amount of, government, kind of patients that have, found me through the grapevine. And they're interestingly enough the ones that are pushing the envelope that want to explore some of these other off-label kind of things. So, I don't want to say too much, but I do think that yes, from a public safety standpoint, that the FDA does have its, needs to kind of come in here and make sure that there is some level of, standardization. Same thing what they did with the DSHEA Act, Dietary
Yep.
Supplement Health Education Act, right? That regulated the nutraceutical industry. Because if not, you're going to get a bunch of these guys pushing a bunch of bullshit, and
Yeah.
you see it all day. You see it all
You
day, and
do.
I'm even seeing it within the community, and it kind of upsets me, honestly, where they're
Oh
like,
yeah.
"Oh, I went to this other provider, and they have me on this warrior stack, and I feel amazing." And it's like, you're probably gonna crash if you come off of that. And then that's not
Mhm.
normal, it's super physiological. And did they test you for any cancer? Did you do a Grail? Did you do a full body MRI? Did you do anything beforehand? No. So just like hormones, there's all these hormone practices that pop
Yes.
up and, that are owned and operated by business people,
Yeah.
and they throw away the ethics behind everything. And I can tell you right now, in my area there's a clinic that's gone nationwide, and it's owned by a bunch of business people, and they practice questionably on the ethical side. And
Mhm.
and with that being said, it's just one of those things that I don't. For me, I'd rather deal with ethics, quality over quantity, and make sure that we're doing really good medicine before just trying to sell you
Yeah.
something. That's it. So there is a lot of snake oil, unfortunately, in this industry, and there's a lot of bullshit. And for the consumer, they're just seeing what somebody on Instagram is saying, right? They're like,
Yeah.
oh, this post by this influencer on Instagram, it must be good. No, that person is a shithead. You should not listen to them. And they're probably disseminating more nonsense than anything else. And, I'm not saying doctors always have the answer, but, there's a lot of disinformation out there that's kind of being disseminated that's just not good. Right. And I think you see that I have trying to have a really balanced perspective on things, you know, and
Absolutely.
I just don't get behind all the hype, right? So I hope that
Well,
answered.
I think we both agree that there is no silver bullet. You can be absolutely excited about new things that come out. You can experience things and say, this helped me. I think
Right.
then, but there is this idea that this is the answer to everything that ails you is no different than what conventional medicine has been espousing for so long, but obviously is not because we're sicker than ever. I think we
Yeah.
have to take a logical standpoint that each of us are so uniquely different, and there are wonderful solutions out there, but we have to use and kind of lean on the education, the knowledge base, the wisdom, the artistry of practitioners such as yourself to help us to understand and weed through all the bullshit that is out there. Because if you're using Instagram, I'll just say, if you're using Instagram as your main medical, perspective, and this is me knocking on myself because I get it all the time. Anil, it's wild. Like people DM me, don't know me, and will give me like their whole history and everything. What do I do? I'm like, go see a doctor, man. Like don't write
Yeah.
me on Instagram expecting me to give you a real answer that's going to help you. Even with the knowledge, even if I had everything there, this would not be the platform. And this would not be like a one-on-one. You'd have to go in and really understand a person before answering any question. But unfortunately, we want that simplistic like AI chat GPT, like here's what's wrong, what do I do? And just a outcomes and answer and a solution. And that's unfortunate because I do think we're becoming to like we're getting to this point where we're putting convenience over everything else, and that's just not going to solve the problems we're dealing with as health as a whole, or even optimizing our health. If we do it, in a shortcut way, we're not going to get optimal results.